We're live. Hey, welcome to Digital Fortress. I have Mark and DC here today. They're going to talk about the synergies between the two Project Catalyst proposals they have in. Mark has submitted a Project Catalyst proposal for dCloud, and some of you are familiar with the details of that. Mark will tell us a little bit about that. DC has submitted the Project Catalyst proposal for Liqwid, and he has recently won a prize at the WIO Hackathon, and he can tell us a little bit about that as well. Well done, Dwayne. That was great. Fantastic work to you. And so let's get started. Who wants to tell us first a little bit about quick summary of dCloud, quick summary of Liqwid, and then how's the synergy work? What do you guys got?
Okay, so the dCloud has basically two parts. It has service providers and service consumers. Majority of people would be the consumers of services built on top of dCloud, and the application developers would use dCloud for their off-chain components of their decentralized applications. If you look at the service provider side, it's a capitally intense business because, well, the high-end computers are relatively expensive, high-end internet is expensive, and so on and so forth. But it also provides quite a big margins. So if we design a good decentralized autonomous organization and right tokenomics model, what I see the synergy with Liqwid, which is a peer-to-peer lending platform, which Dwayne will explain further a little bit later, we could find a way how we can leverage Liqwid to finance the service provider side of the build-up of the dCloud infrastructure, let's say.
Excellent. Thank you. And DC, can you give us a quick summary of Liqwid? And again, congratulations on the WIO Hackathon and the massive energy behind the Project Catalyst proposal. What do you got, buddy?
Cheers, Rick. Thanks for having me on again. And Mark, great rundown about everything with dCloud. So Liqwid is really trying to establish a money market on Cardano for borrowers and for lenders, folks who want to earn interest on their ADA, or people who want to basically borrow against that ADA, or any other stable coin or token built on top of Cardano. We do that by creating and establishing these liquidity pools that any token can then be loaned or borrowed against. So our system right now, you talked about the Wyoming Hackathon and kind of what we developed during that process, using the Marlowe playground and actually extending some things in the Haskell data structure. We built all 5 of the contract functions that underpin the Liqwid markets. So each of the Liqwid pools, there's specific contract functions that anyone who wants to engage in the protocol can use, whether you want to mint, whether you want to deposit some assets and then mint the underlying plus interest-bearing token that you can then use in any other Cardano application, whether you want to borrow against your assets, if you want to liquidate someone who has an unhealthy loan in the system, right? If you want to redeem your tokens later on with that interest at a later date, all these different things that you can interact with the markets. Those contract functions were basically constructed in the Marlowe playground and then gone through the simulator, the SMT solver, all of the kind of static analysis tools that you get within Marlowe. We were able to basically run through all of those, even the mint and burn contract functions, which we built ourselves in the extended source code for Haskell. We were actually able to use the static analysis tools in Marlowe to test against. And it was great. It was a good experience for our Haskell devs. They're very excited to get hands-on with Plutus, but working with Marlowe is definitely like the first step towards that, especially when you're talking about a decentralized finance protocol like what Liqwid is building. So, yeah.
Nice. All right. Hey, in a nutshell, DC, can you tell me about the types of tests you did? Was it on something called a native token, or was it on something like an ERC20, or both, or what kind of tokens?
Yeah, so it was just on ADA actually, just because right now with Marlowe, you can introduce different tokens, but the way Cardano is right now without the multi-asset ledger, which we expect sometime in November or December, like before the end of 2020, right? And knock on wood that comes through. But without having that multi-asset ledger, it's a little bit of a wonky deal to try to introduce a different token. But it's a great question, Rick, because one of the main contract functions, especially for those depositing in Liqwid, is this idea of a Q token. It's a derivative token that represents the underlying asset plus the interest that's accruing every single block to that token. So I'll give you an example. I deposit some ADA because I want to both stake my ADA and earn interest at the same time. Once I deposit it, some synthetic mechanism is happening where real ADA is still being staked, but there's now ADA in this Liqwid pool, which I deposited. I now have a token that's just representing my deposit, almost like a receipt of the deposited ADA that I put in that pool, plus the interest that it's accruing, as well as the staking that the rewards that it's getting. So all of those things are basically bundled into this derivative token that gets minted. And then when the lender comes back, they've earned interest over time and they want to basically capture all of that interest they've accrued. They then burn that derivative token. That's all going to be controlled by smart contracts within the multi-asset ledger and using Plutus and Plutus Core. But you can't really introduce those things the way you want to on the Marlowe playground just yet. So we kept it simple. We use basically proxy versions of those, and we use different roles within the Marlowe playground to spell out what the logic would look like in Plutus when you have a general purpose, but not to the full extent. With the mint and burn examples, we actually were able to create the full the mint contract function. But again, it's using a constant. In the real world, it's going to be using an actual exchange rate of the derivative underlying versus the actual ADA token. And the derivative will always be worth more because it's technically ADA plus interest that accrues each instance, each block. So it's like time value of money technically. You just can't reproduce those kind of like dynamic, changing exchange rates within Marlowe quite yet. But using very actually simple, like say decimal point and like Haskell libraries that already exist right now. Tweeg's worked on some of them, FP Complete, some of the partners that we've already talked to basically have worked on some of these safe arithmetic Haskell libraries that are going to enable us to very easily introduce like our derivative token concepts, and the multi-asset ledger makes these things actually pretty simple.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, DC.
Sure.
All right. So where's the synergy lie? How do these two fit?
Yeah, Mark kind of hit on it before, and I'll let Mark, expand on it because he's the whole, data cloud guy. But I definitely think there's an off-chain component to what we're building with Liqwid, and we're going to need to host that somewhere. It definitely makes sense to try to go decentralized with it. When you talk about trying to build the decentralized financial system, even Simon's example in the last product update of using the oracles and having a pretty decentralized way to get very secure, exchange data that's public key signed from Coinbase, Binance, OKX, the top 10 exchanges. And then you can have that on chain to basically act as a role within your contracts. You've just decentralized your whole price feed structure. Now you need to decentralize your whole hosting, your whole cloud server setup structure. And we had some ideas around using oracles, using the same stake pool players to operate as oracle pools, and then to also use them to host our machines, our front end application. But then we thought about, is it simpler to really take a route like dCloud? And I think in many ways it will be, because what dCloud is kind of aiming to do is roll up all those different, all the different bandwidth that these different stake pool service providers can provide into one kind of united cloud hosting platform. So Mark, if you want to kind of expand on what the what the logistics would look like.
If I would look at the like a 5-year plan,
sure.
The goal would be that you could run an oracle on dCloud, paid in by for instance Treasury or your smart contract or your DAO or whatever. And it would use the ecosystem of stake pool operators who actually have physical hardware, don't run on cloud like Rake, to provide this compute capability that you currently rent from, like, either you buy the hardware yourself or you rent it from Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and few other players. So there are many projects in this space that try to do one of the three basic things that I would consider for to be what AVS and such provide. It's storage, it's networking, and it's compute. So when I look at these three things, the easiest problem to solve is the storage, and there is already a good project called StoreJ, which we can tap into as it's open source and so on and so forth. And we want to introduce an app that the consumer could use that would do backups, and it would generate revenue that we could use to pay the node operators. But in the beginning, just like Rick, when he started his pool, he invested a capital expense, and now he is getting an operational income, right?
Yep.
And so as you present it kind of represents a cost of money in time or internal rate of returns on investments. So I believe that we could issue tokens that would represent the profitability and the reliability of individual operator that could then be used with Liqwid to influence the credit score.
Well,
Yeah, so
that's an interesting
yeah,
idea. Yeah.
yeah. So the whole, I want to kind of take this stance because Mark just mentioned it to clear up some things. We're going to start really simple with how we introduce certain products for Liqwid. So the credit score, you talk about 5-year horizon, right? The credit score product and the whole credit delegation, and even like the maturity of the Liqwid DAO and what we're trying to set up there as a community-led organization, that's going to take some time. That's not going to come as quickly as the most competitive compound like money market on Cardano, right? So the borrow lending system we're going to introduce will come first, right? It'll all be collateralized crypto lending. All tokens on Cardano will be able to have a market, basically. Supply and demand algos will take over the rest. Credit delegation, credit-based products, things like just some of the more fancy, sophisticated things that we want to introduce. And we're super keen on bringing them in because we actually think they're 0-to-1 innovations in terms of what emerging markets currently have. We just need way more. I've been working with some PhD researchers at places like Oxford and universities across America, and it's going to take some time to de-risk a lot of these concepts before we even introduce them on a testnet version. Not the borrow lending. That's very simple. We've already seen the equivalent of that on Ethereum. And that's why I'm saying that's something that we're attacking now and building on Plutus now. But to the credit concept, for instance, that's going to come later on, maybe even in like a V2 roadmap, to be honest. From where we are now, it needs to be prudently introduced, right? The research needs to be de-risked and all those things need to happen before. But to your point, Mark, there still is a huge component of hosting the actual off-chain infrastructure, which is where dCloud and the stake pool operators, they certainly come into play because, Rick, you guys have all this hardware, some of you guys have bare metal set up, some of you guys have, straight cloud, but decentralized, distributed all over the world, data centers in 16 countries in the case of, my stake pool operator, Holger. So I know that there's a varied setup in terms of all these different pool operators, and there's now over 1,200 of you guys and girls. So that in itself is like, wow, there's so much just like alpha in terms of this service provider level that's just untapped right now that you can build entire classes of applications around and never need to rely on the AWS, or the Azures of the world. You just don't need that anymore because you already get that. If you incentivize all of these players the right way, which you can, right? We think in Liqwid of all incentives and disincentives to run the entire protocol, right? So this whole idea of yield farming and giving folks governance ownership of the protocol, okay, that's incentivizing liquidity and good behavior and the ability to repay your loans. But you can also incentivize stake pool operators. You can incentivize them to run Oracle pools. You can incentivize them to host your application. Like all of these things, you can disincentivize them to do bad things with credit concepts like Mark just mentioned. But you really do have to get these things right from a game theory standpoint before you introduce them, because it's like, once it's up, right? There's no turning back once you introduce things. And that's why we de-risked even our tokenomics to a point where like, we think we have a model that's super simple, super generalizable, can be taken into the future and the community can run with it over something that might be, more closely reminiscent of what happens in corporate finance today, but just is too crazy and too over the top and heady for what crypto land really needs and what is working today in DeFi protocols. So yeah, we're super keen on trying to keep this thing lean and agile, but very general and basic because there's applications that you can build on top of Liqwid. Open smart contracts is going to be a revolution on Cardano. We don't even know what Plutus application backend is really going to enable, but when you think about the concept of building on top of other people's work and composability, just what you get with the structure and the framework of the Plutus platform is going to take that whole concept to the next orders of magnitude levels higher than what we've seen on Ethereum or anything else. So we have to keep that in mind as well and build base protocols that are really easy to build on top of, super open and transparent, audible for anyone to use, but also, super de-risk when you introduce kind of more bespoke concepts like credit. I just wanted to clear that up because I know there was some like outstanding questions on, is Liqwid coming out with all these, credit and delegation, all these different features? No, the V1 is going to look very similar to just a base borrow lending protocol. But yeah, again, a lot of people can get good utility out of that.
Yeah, DC, people always appreciate your expanded descriptions. They're great. Okay, so what I'd like to do, guys, is I'm going to invite viewers to ask questions in the chat. Currently, there's 70 people online, between 66 and 72 people up. So it's always good to have since we have a live stream. Feel free to ask questions in the chat, and then we'll segue back over to Mark. Mark, could you give me an example in a nutshell? In a nutshell, if I wanted to deploy something on dCloud, how could I do it? And how does that support the concepts that DC just described?
So I tell you in what we plan to be able to do in 6 months. And I will share my screen for that.
Nice.
That's okay. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes. Yep. I see Windows File Explorer.
If I open this site, this is a work in progress proof of concept site for a stake pool that I'm partnering with. And if you look at this website, it's all static files that could be hosted on our dStore platform. And that's basically all JavaScript, HTML, and CSS that doesn't require a trusted computing model. It can work in a trustless way that you would just publish your URL on a blockchain with the hash of some metadata file that would verify that nobody cheated, and this is how the website owner website owner wants it. So 90% of Liqwid could basically in 6 months be migrated to dCloud platform, and all the user-facing components of it would be basically supported. That's the current plan for the 6 months, and that's basically it. But later on, as we would add other components, we would be able to host applications like GitHub, where we could actually even have the Cardano developers use it as their source code management repository for developing smart contracts, the blockchain itself, and so on.
Okay, so the other stake pool operators out in the world will be able to access the dCloud technology via this website, linking the URL. Is that how you describe that?
The pool operators could use could write their website for their pool in a way that it doesn't run on like Amazon or whatever, but it runs on dCloud. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay, and most pool operators know how to do that because it's very similar to the way they put the JSON files with their metadata, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Would I be able to do it with my hardware servers?
You would be the ideal hoster for the ones who don't have the hardware servers but are running in cloud.
Okay, so there's a way to do it.
Yeah.
Certainly. Okay. Nice.
Well, basically, dCloud node would run parallel to your Cardano node if you would choose to run it on the same infrastructure, or it would run on a separate server if you would decide to buy a separate server for it.
Okay, and the Liqwid protocol would run as an instance inside that when the Marlow and Plutus, basically Goguen technologies, are available inside Cardano node. Yes.
Yeah, the off-chain piece would run on that. Yes.
The on-chain piece, the Plutus and the Marlow, as DC said, would run in Cardano node. But the GUI, the user interactions, like when you experimenting with some DeFi protocol and it asks you to allow MetaMask, right?
Right.
To access your ETH. Right. That runs in a browser in the JavaScript on the website, and that piece, that off-chain piece, could be deployed on dCloud in 6 months.
Understood. Yeah, and we have great partners, App Inventive, a team of devs in North India who are, they build DeFi protocols and liquidity systems, and they're used to launching these on whether it's AWS, central infrastructure, or something a little more hybrid, to full-on decentralized, bare bones infrastructure. So it really, Mark, to your point, like this would be great if this is something that's prepared in 6 months, because in our 6 months timeline, you can check out on our website, liquid.finance, we are basically trying to deploy our testnet, V1 borrow lending protocol on Plutus testnet at that point. It'll be the same exact code that we plan to deploy on mainnet, but just again, in our ethos of trying to bring things and introduce things after they've been de-risked to the full max. It just makes sense to launch on the Plutus testnet, get a few weeks to a month or so of good data, and then launch the thing on mainnet, even if the code is the exact. Really also gives us a chance to see what Plutus really looks like on a full testnet that's very similar to a mainnet infrastructure. Kind of like what you guys did with stake pools when you set up, last December before you went really live. There was all that testing, and it started with your, self-contained boxes, and then you guys started relaying back to each other. It's the same exact process when you're talking about introducing, a financial application after it's gone through its rounds of internal and external audits, all those things. But, I kind of wanted to shift to a certain point and ask you a question, Mark, before we take any community questions. And I don't know if you have this concept, but, I work with all of these like different service providers for my day job, and whether it's AWS or Azure, or even the smaller shops, right? Even some of these smaller kind of application devs who also have some hosting services, right? Their SLAs are so robust. Their SLAs are so defined and everything. And what I mean, service level agreements, right? Just for anyone watching who doesn't know what that is. The ability to define not only how downtime works, but whether it's X percentage or whatever rebate or whatever, kickback you get when there is some downtime. Do you have any concept like that for dCloud? Do you think about those things? Like
I am as a profession, I am an IT governance consultant for a private sector. Every single one of my customers is publicly listed, regulated at least by SOX, PCI DSS, or even JXP, which is for pharma. So I was writing SLA agreements between individual departments of, let's say, global infrastructure services organization that would have like 2,000 employees worldwide, maybe 12 data centers, with other business units that were consuming their internal services. So we wouldn't launch this in the 6 months, of course.
Right.
But the concepts are being thought of, they are being written down, and they are being explored, and that is certainly a long-term plan.
For sure. And even cooler, you could use it to like incentivize the different stake pool operators. Like it's like, oh, if your performance at like in Cardano right now in staking, for instance, you just measure performance as a way for delegators to decide how performant you are. But what if in your system in dCloud, you could tie performance to the SLA and say, oh, the top 10, percentile performing whatever stake pool operators get like X amount more of your governance token ratio to what they do. Something like that.
Actually, there will be concept of fungible and non-fungible tokens, and the fungible tokens, the governance ones, everyone will get some, but the amount of sum will be multiplied by some value that is associated with that NFT, or multiple NFTs for different things.
Sure. Yeah, I was talking more like tying it to the SLA and the performance, but I get the concept. Yeah.
But once we have this reliability rating,
right,
we would, as a DAO,
right,
start presenting services with SLAs, utilizing the services provided by those operators who hold the required NFT tokens.
That's sound. Yeah. Honestly, it sounds like we're taking similar routes to like our DAO construction.
Yeah.
And like how.
We already agreed that if we will go to the next phase as part of Project Catalyst, we will work jointly on a DAO research, right? We will also launch with the basic DAO in February or shortly after, but have a long-term plans regarding the DAO research.
Yeah, and even like joint DAOs, DAOs that talk to other DAOs. Like that would be really cool. Like you can explore so much. And I know we talked to Adam Dean and the stake pool guys as well. So love to bring some of those guys in and think about, because I know there's so many different kind of like mini DAOs setting up for the stake pool operators. And our guy Holger, he's in the Spakra one, and I know there's a few others. So it'd be cool to see if we can kind of join together those little disparate stake pool alliances. I really do think that the whole staking infrastructure Cardano is setting up, I know this is kind of off topic, but I do think that it's going to set us up for the next decade in terms of like the actual sound, granted, that different devs and builders like myself are going to like be using. You don't get this anywhere else. And, you know,
Yeah.
I hate to go on a tangent. I saw a tweet this morning. It was like, I don't want to say who it was from, but it was from a pretty prominent Cardano, you know, community member. And he was saying like, it was a poll that he put out, like, should we fork the supply of ADA to get rid of like the whales or something? I was like, okay, let's just look at the base statistics of not only the fact that ADA is the most fairly distributed proof of stake token by far. The only thing that comes close to it is proof of works like Bitcoin and Litecoin. Even Ethereum, 2-year head start, still behind Cardano in terms of its fair distribution, proof of work and all. So it just seemed ridiculous. But then when you think about, you know, where we are with 1,200 stake pool operators, not even a full quarter into Shelley, and, you know, the fact that we don't even have smart contracts, Voltaire is not even launched. We're 30% of the way rolled out, and we're already talking about forking the coin supply of ADA when it is the most fairly distributed programmable blockchain token in existence. Go to, you know, into the block, go look at the machine learning and statistics data they put together. They don't even like Cardano, and they still put together honest data that shows you that ADA is the most distributed token you can buy in the top 10. And you're going to say that we should fork the supply. It was just like, come on, guys. Love this community, but you can't even fork this ecosystem at this point. Like when you look at how fast the momentum of Cardano is taking off at this point, Foundation, Emergo, IOHK, the community with the defund now, right? Like you can fork the coin, and people have tried to fork Bitcoin, right? People have tried to fork Ethereum. You're never going to fork this ecosystem, this community at this point. And by the time smart contracts get here, you could take that up and order. It'll just get that much harder to try to do something like that. So it was kind of like, honestly, as someone who's been here from the start, I see things like that as like a threat to this community, because it's just like, here's someone who like actually has some trust from community members, and to introduce like that. I mean, sure, let's talk about forking. It's fine. It's a part of this idea.
You know what? I did talk about forking Cardano, right?
You did.
Yeah. And I actually still plan on forking Cardano code base, not the Cardano blockchain, because as I build my cloud, I will need a telemetry and accounting database.
Of
so
course.
It will be a blockchain, but I have different functional requirements than financial operating system. So my DAO will live on Cardano mainnet using a Cardano sidechain, which will roll up every 30 days. And just save snapshots on the Cardano mainnet. It will instead of blocks every 2 seconds like we have, it will have blocks every 1 minute, because I want more censorship resistance. So I want the ability to be able to have my operators run on like Tor like network, and so on and so forth. But those are things that will be happening in like 2 years.
Sure.
But it would still be compatible with and interact with the main Cardano blockchain.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's the reason. That's even a reason why I would fork Cardano specifically, because there is a paper on how to build a side chain between two Cardano networks. So that, I mean,
100%. I agree. I think, and again, you're going to get your updates from the fact that Cardano and IOHK are still constantly updated.
I would
the code. Forking the code makes so much sense. Like that is why it's public. That's why it's decentralized. Anyone can and should fork the code and build. You already see like Nakamoto proof of stake. They basically forked our Ouroboros ideas, IOHKs, and built on top of it. That is amazing. I'm talking about someone saying, let's fork the coin supply of ADA and redistribute it just for that specific policy. To me, that's like an attack on this community at this point.
That was never my intention.
And I know that. I understand that.
Yeah, I think DC's example was example of what not to do. I don't think it would even work. It
would never.
No one would go along with that. Like,
they tried it. I mean, Tesla's community tried it. There is a Dune fork.
Right, exactly. Talk about that, Mark.
Can you explain that? Shitcoin. I got an airdrop because I held some teasers. And well, there was a fork. There were some Dune tokens. Well, I sold most of them for, I think, Ethereum, and then I sold that Ethereum to ADA, and I maybe got like $200 for free.
Yeah.
And I have a little stake which came from staking the Dune token, which is like worth, I don't know, maybe $5 or something like that. I don't even keep track of it. I don't even know if I know where the paper wallet is. But it was a community. It was an attempt to create a competitor.
And why was Tesla so set on that? Like, why was that the route that they wanted to take?
I have no reason why the person who decided to fork it forked it.
Yeah,
I
it
just
never
know
works.
that their development velocity is like quarter of that of Tezos itself.
Yeah. So, we'll bring it back on track here to kind of wrap this up. I don't think anyone will actually ever try. Well, people will try to fork the main Cardano chain, but I think what we will see is maybe 3 to 5 years out are forks of the Cardano code base that provide certain performance characteristics,
Sure.
but still interacts with the main blockchain, right? So the forks won't be to create a new blockchain. It'll have a certain characteristic, like it runs faster on some sort of hardware, or it provides some sort of service. And those are the kind of good forks that you want to see that will improve the ecosystem. Maybe runs on a cash register, who knows, runs inside a Visa credit card server or whatever, right? So those are just examples. So let's bring it back in. I'd say we would go about another 5 or 10 minutes, guys. Does that sound good?
Sounds good.
I don't see any questions in chat that people have. If anyone has questions, let us know in chat. We'll wrap up here in about 5 minutes or so, maybe 10 at the most. So guys, what's in summary? What are the most important key points on dCloud, the most important key points on the Liqwid, and how do those two work together? I know you touched on them in detail. What do you got to summarize and wrap us up here?
I mean, if I were to summarize the proposals that I see on the idea scale, there were proposals for things like Spotify and so on and so forth. Well, these things need dCloud to be able to be doable, or they will run on like AVS or something, and these corporations will be able to shut it down if they will want for whatever reason. So basically, dCloud is a foundation for many proposals that has been made as part of Idea Scale platform and Project Catalyst in Fund 2.
So dCloud will improve immutability, and it'll almost eliminate the ability to censor.
That's the end goal. Yes.
Nice. There you go. DC, what do you got?
Yeah, I just want to say before I even get into Liqwid, I'm super bullish on what Mark is doing with dCloud, and I actually think it's very necessary for Cardano. It's 100% one of the proposals I'll be voting on. Even I'm glad that you upped the amount that you asked for and are making this, a real legitimate project instead of really just a research and analysis up front, because I think that it deserves that much respect for what you're trying to build.
I basically raised the amount, but committed also an MVP that will enable you to store your data on a component that is directly connected to Cardano blockchain, and you will be able to pay for those services in ADA.
Yeah, no,
it could be like your Google Disk Drive or OneDrive or Apple Drive, whatever they have, iCloud.
Right, and the ability to iterate on top of that is super bullish. So yeah, so Liqwid, we're really thinking, okay, let's bring decentralized to Cardano, but let's bring a base liquidity pool that can serve as this lending borrowing market, and then build features on top of it, right? The whole idea of implementing this Liqwid DAO from the start, and then building things like credit concepts and credit delegation on top of this, getting us to a point where we actually have really sophisticated financial products that you really actually only see in Western markets. Folks without, social securities or credit scores really don't have access to some of these things in the way that we'd like to in the future enable them. We're going to start off with the V1 simple lending, borrowing, crypto collateralized backed product. We're calling it Liqwid Pools. It's going to look very similar to the compounds and the AAVs of the world today. You'll be able to deposit ADA, earn interest on it. Your ADA will be staked. You'll be able to do that for any other Cardano stablecoin, obviously not staking them, but earning interest on them or borrowing against them. There's a governance token concept that we'll introduce pretty soon here when we introduce the Liqwid DAO. And then there's a role for stake pool operators as well. We see them as service providers in our network. And we want to reward them and treat them for their labor because we agree that it's a huge component of decentralizing the entire platform. We would love to launch on dCloud as soon as it's live. We ourselves plan to be live on Plutus testnet. We have a 6-month roadmap that you can check out on our website at liqwid.finance. Follow us on Discord. Follow us on Twitter at Liqwid Finance. And yeah, happy to take on any more questions. DM me, please.
Cool. All right. And I'll get some links from you guys and put them down in the description when we wrap up here. And I have your link to liqwid.finance. I have the link to the dCloud Doka Pool website. I have those over in the chat. If people in the chat want to scroll up, you can see links there. I'll put those in the description as well. We do have a few questions in chat. We can touch on those, but I'll kind of summarize here. This will be the wrap up of the podcast. And that is, I would like to invite you guys, feel free to come back to Digital Fortress as the details begin to emerge and your products continue to develop. If you would like to come back on and tell us from the user perspective, if I'm a user of dCloud, how do I deploy on it, Mark? And DC, if I'm a user of Liqwid Finance and I want to use the services you provide, how do I use your service, and give it, we're going to kind of flip the lens around and look at it from the perspective of, I am a consumer of your products. Tell me what that consumer experience looks like. Does that sound good, guys?
Sounds great.
All right. So you want to take a few questions in chat? There's an interesting discussion going on there. I'll review it real quick and then we'll wrap up. All right.
All right.
So the question there, and you guys are pros, so you might be able to help with this. Tommy from Entertainment is trying to help answer the questions, but Nicholas Schreiber asks, with delegation over 50%, is forking even possible? And Tommy makes note that a fork in a discussion is not dependent on delegation. And then goes on to say, they talked about forking in terms of a completely new project. So the question here was about the forking conversation that came up. And Tommy also said Dwayne was referring to a tweet that suggested forking Cardano to redistribute. Okay, right. So we discussed it. Do you guys have, in a nutshell, does it matter if the stake pool operators hold 50%, which was brought up? Does it matter what the holdings of the stake pool operators or the amount of stake delegated? What's your take on this?
No, I'll let Mark take the full kind of Tezos, Dune, or Rune example, but it doesn't matter at all, right? It's the whole point of being a decentralized crypto is that it can be forked. To Mark's point, side chains are a component of forking Cardano. I gave the example of researchers who have forked Ouroboros papers and built, staking that are a Nakamoto proof of stake on top of that, right? So there's this concept of forking everything. That's okay. But when you're talking about forking the coin supply, forking that to redistribute it, you're actually talking about basically forking the community and the ecosystem, right? The one thing that bonds us, the social contract that is Ada Lovelace's, the 45 billion that will only ever exist, right? The entire concept of the emission rate and the supply going down every 4 years, like all those things are social construct just as much as they are technical, right? So trying to fork that and change that, you're basically trying to rewrite the entire fabric of the Cardano ecosystem. And I'm saying to whoever wants to do that, good luck, right? Like we're already at that, we're at that emission point. We're at that whatever you want to call it, that kind of
the critical mass
asymptote, right? That critical mass where things just kind of collide. And once Gogan is here, I mean, it's S-curve at that point. You're not going to be able to try to introduce these really kind of threats to the whole entire ecosystem. Whoever did that, I'm not even going to call him out, but it was really kind of immature. I was like, at that point, you're basically saying you're upset that you don't have enough tokens, or you're upset that wealth exists unequally, that there's unequal distributions of wealth in the world today. And you think that cryptos can solve that. You're false in both your ideologies, no matter what. Like, and as someone who's just a working class kid, only a couple years out of college, I am not an Ada whale. I know Ada whales in Japan. I know they exist all over the world. But to say that you're going to just redistribute the token because those people have money and decided to buy the ICO or bought Ada when it was 2 cents a couple months ago in March, come on, like that just sounds and this is someone who the community looks at too as like a leader. It's like, grow up. Like,
hey, DC, I'm going to fork the US dollar so I can print more than the other guy.
Please, it's toilet paper pretty soon, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All right, guys. Hey, sounds good. Mark, anything else? We're going to wrap it up. You got it?
There was some question for me, actually.
Okay.
About
question.
He was talking about Tor. What about I2P? I am looking into I2P, but the Tor has a greater community around it, and it has it's application transparent for TCP application. I2P is an application level protocol, so it would require more modification. So it can be maybe put in the roadmap. But for that's the same purpose, I'm also evaluating what Rena could bring to this table, to this discussion, and if that could be utilized for that as well.
Nice. All right. Thank you, Mark, for that. And again, we're wrapping up, and we will come back. You guys can come back to Digital Fortress anytime you would like. And if you want to come back, especially for what that user experience looks like from the user perspective in the future, shout out to Mark, his pool Dolka, use that to support dCloud. And Holger, what's the name of Holger's pool, Dwayne, supporting the
Yeah, it's Cardano 24. The ticker is ADA. So
ADA, ticker ADA?
Nice sticker.
Yeah, that's
He
it.
was
Yeah.
early.
Surprised it was free.
Yeah, he was early. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Well
Yeah.
done, guys. Nice work. And thank you for coming on Digital Fortress. I'm going to bring down the live stream here. Thank you, viewers, for your questions and everything that you do on watching Digital Fortress. Feel free to hit like and subscribe. Help support the channel, boost the channel's numbers up, and get more viewers on there, because Cardano is massive. And guess what, guys? We're going for number one.
Let's go, baby.
We're going for number one.
I already know it.
You got it. You got it. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
Thanks for having
Thanks.
us on. Cheers.
Thanks.
Cheers, Rick.
Cheers.
Cheers, Mark.